So I asked Sifu John, what's the number one question coming up around internal Wing Chun? And the question is, how do I actually develop internal power? So I'm a student of Sifu John Kogan who studied with Chun in Hong Kong for 10 years before he passed away. Now, Chun was known as one of Ip Man's greatest disciples, and he was also known as the king of Sinim Tao. In other words, the king of internal power. He was a small, structured, frail, 75-year-old man who was able to flick around the room and much stronger, athletic, bigger men than him. So he had incredible amounts of internal power. And this is what Sifu John learnt from him and has passed on to his students, including myself. Now, from my experience with generating internal power, which is what internal Wing Chun is all about, there are three things that you need to practice and practice consistently. The first one is probably the most important, and it is the state. So becoming and embodying what we call the state, which is an energetic condition that essentially aligns the body, mind, and spirit in order to develop internal power. And I will go into that in a second. The second thing you need to practice consistently are the Wing Chun forms, specifically the first form. Why? Because the first form consists of all of the foundational movements in Wing Chun that you'll need to learn. And the more consistently you practice them, the more natural you are going to become at them. So if you ever need to use them in a real life street fight or self-defense situation, they're going to naturally just come out of you. The third thing is Chi Sao. So you want to get good at being able to stay in the energetic condition, the state, whilst under immense amounts of pressure. So staying in a super calm, uplifted, positive vibration, focused and disciplined whilst under pressure. And that's not an easy thing to do. So those are the three things that you need to do, practice consistently: the state, the forms, and if you can, if you've got training partners, Chi Sao. It's not so much about practicing techniques. Yes, techniques are important, they're going to help you develop it, but those are the three most important things that Sifu John teaches us to practice consistently. So every day if you can, or as regularly as possible. Now let's break down the state and get an understanding of what it actually is. Firstly, it comprises of 5 different elements or types of energy. The first one is the most important. It is called your spiritual or your highest intention. This is essentially an elevated level of energy or a frequency, a vibration, a field of consciousness that we are aligning ourselves with in order to lift our own vibration. So choose one for yourself. Perhaps that's joy, peace, unconditional love, courage, confidence, the prosperity, freedom, whatever feels right to you. You want to choose the direction for your training and for your life and align yourself with it, which you will understand how to do once you start practicing the meditation, the state. Now, why is it important to align ourselves with higher fields of consciousness? So the higher your level of consciousness, which is explained on the map of consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins, if you're familiar with his work, the more powerful you are going to be. For example, when Sifu John was training with Chun in Hong Kong, Chun was a very wise and joyful character. This meant that he had a high level of consciousness because joy and wisdom calibrate quite high on the map of consciousness. So he was able to generate a lot of power. Now, Sifu John over the years would see people come in and get really good. He would see people come in and say the same, and other people would actually get worse even though they were training consistently. And he noticed the pattern. The ones that were getting really good were the positive, uplifted, joyful, happy, free people. Whereas the people that were getting worse were quite angry and they were always coming from a forceful state. What this meant is that their level of consciousness was quite low. So they would actually get worse as a result because they were being forceful. So the people that were joyful had a high level of consciousness. So there is a direct link between your level of consciousness and the amount of power that you're actually able to generate. So that's why that's important in terms of internal power development. Now, the second element of the state is called centering. It's very simple. We all have a center line. It starts from just above the crown of your head, goes down the center of your body through the spine, out through the tailbone and into the ground in between your feet. So we start by firstly sensing that line, and then we see it filling up with bright white light. Then what we do, which you might have heard before in Wing Chun, is we infuse spirit into the center. Now, we do that simply by getting into a good vibration of our spiritual intention and then centering. That is how we infuse spirit into the center. So, spiritual intention, centering. The next element is sensing. So sensing is simply the ability to sense one's space. So you want to be able to sense your entire energetic body. I just feel or sense my arms, that's the weight that's going directly towards the target. But if I'm able to sense my whole body and my whole structure, I'm unifying my body's mass, and I've got my entire unification of body mass then going forward towards the target, which is much more powerful than simply sensing my arms or my legs and having that going forward. So the next element is known as sinking, also known as sinking the chi. It's simply what we call the moving energy, and we're getting used to directing the flow of energy. Yeah. So sinking we use usually in a downward motion, and we use it to sink through our space. So we sink through the head, we sense the energy moving down into the face, the neck, the shoulders, all the way through our space and down to the feet. And this is directly linked to letting go. Now, letting go is incredibly important. In Wing Chun, if you want to become powerful at internal power development, you need to let go of any pain, tension, and emotional blocks that are in your body, because any type of pain, tension, or blocks are going to stop your power from coming through or limit it. So the more you're able to let go of these blocks, pain and tension from your space, the more powerful you're going to be. And also the more lighter, freer, and joyful you're going to feel in your daily life. So that's another thing that we use sinking for. The next element of the state is seeing. So if I was to say, think of a hamburger, you'd be able to see a hamburger very clearly in your mind. Or think of an ice cream, you'd be able to see an ice cream very clearly in your mind. Well, in Wing Chun, when it comes to power development, we use the seeing energy for many things. One of the main things is to see our whole body filling up with light, which is incredibly healing, and it also helps to activate our space. We also use it to see the center line of our opponent, because in Wing Chun, if you want to be able to dominate your opponent, you need to be able to capture their center. Once you've captured their center, you can move them wherever you want. If you can see the center line of your opponent, that is going to help you to capture it, to take their balance. So those are the 5 elements of the state. You've got spiritual intention, centering in your highest intention. You've got sinking, sensing, and see. Now, once you're actually in that state, that's fantastic, but you want to be able to then aim it forward towards your opponent's center. When you've got that entire condition aiming forward towards your opponent's center, you are going to be unstoppable if you're in the state correctly. Yeah. So how do we do this? We do this via firstly being in the condition itself, and then we use what we call the power plane. Now, the power plane is simply a plane of power going from your center line to your opponent's center line. So if you think about your center line, and then you've got someone standing in front of you, and you've got a big piece of cardboard on its side going from your crown to the floor, down the power plane, meeting up with their center line, which goes from their crown to the floor. That's the power plane. So you want to be in the state and then aim everything through that power plane down the center towards your opponent's center line, and that will allow you to capture their center so that you can move them around, take their balance, and do what you like with them. Again, always depending on the level of state that you are in. And you've got to be able to maintain that state under pressure. So that's why it's really important to be able to do the meditation, yes, standing, but then you want to start bringing it into the forms, because then you're introducing the state into very slow movement. So it's quite easy to bring the state into the forms because there's no dynamic movement, it's just standing still. Then you want to be able to bring that into Chi Sao. So you want to be able to maintain that condition of inner peace and all those different elements happening at once whilst you're under pressure and dealing with incoming attacks. And that's where the challenge lies. That's where the fun of it really is. Yeah, and then the aim is that if you're ever in a real street fight, that you're able to maintain that state as well and bring that into actual street self-defense so that you're able to use your power in an actual self-defense situation. So just to quickly recap, 3 things that you need to work on consistently in order to develop internal power. That is the state, become a master of the state, the forms, all the forms, but in particularly the first form, and Chi Sao. Hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments.